So, dear colleagues and friends, welcome to this session of the ELSI Dialogues. My name is Melanie Goisov. I'm Senior Scientist in the BBMRI-ERIC ELSI team, and I will be moderating these ELSI Dialogues. And today we are going to explore trustworthy AI and the ethics, practice, and impact of AI, specifically in cancer research and care. Briefly, some background about BBMRI-ERIC. It stands for Biobanking and Biomolecular Resources Research Infrastructure, European Research Infrastructure Consortium, and it has the scope to facilitate access to samples and data collection across Europe to advance biomedical research for the benefit of European citizens. And to reach this goal, BBMRI-ERIC relies on a network of national nodes in the member countries, as well as a team of interdisciplinary experts from medicine, social science, ethics, law, IT, quality management, patient community, and industry partners with shared values of facilitating access to progress in healthcare and disease prevention. In 2013, BBMRI-ERIC was set up as a distributed research infrastructure, and it is one of the largest research infrastructure for health research in Europe. As regards ELSI services and research, we provide support on ethical, legal, and societal issues. We operate on the basis of a federated model in partnership with a network of experts from academia and practice from across both our national nodes and project partners, alongside three key cornerstones, which is research, service, and training. I want to welcome our today's experts. First, Maciej Bobovic is an assistant professor at the second department of radiology at the Medical University of Gdańsk in Poland, and a surgical oncologist specializing in breast cancer diagnosis and treatment. And his research focuses on the ethical and clinical responsible use of artificial intelligence in oncology, radiomics, and precision medicine. And he leads or contributes to several EU-funded projects, such as You Can Image, RadioVal, Cinderella, just to name a few. And he is also part of the AI for HI network, which supports the UCAM initiative under Europe's breast cancer beating cancer plan. He's also author of over 80 scientific papers, and Maciej is committed to advancing patient-centered, trustworthy, and equitable AI applications in cancer imaging and care. And I also want to welcome Karim Lekadir. He is an ICREA professor in the Department of Mathematics and Computer Science at the University of Barcelona. He obtained his PhD from Imperial College London and was postdoctoral researcher at Stanford University. He investigates new data science techniques for trustworthy and ethical artificial intelligence in medicine. And he has been PI in 15 EU-funded projects, coordinated 6 Horizon projects, and was awarded an ERC Consolidator grant to investigate new AI techniques tailored to resource-limited settings. Welcome to the webinar, everyone, and thank you for your time and for sharing your expertise on this topic. So this session builds on insights from a recent article published in the Journal of Medical Internet Research, which so the three of us, co-authored together with other colleagues. And in this piece, we explored what it really means for AI to be trustworthy, not only as a technical tool, but as something that emerges through relationships among different actors, such as developers, clinicians, patients, and institutions. And in today's webinar, we take the conversation further. So let's dive into this topic. And I want to also start with the first question. I mean, trust and trustworthiness are kind of huge topics and around that, and it's always a challenge how to define them. So for the two of you, how is trust in AI built, or how can it build or maintained in real clinical environments? So what do you, for instance, Maciej, as a clinician, need to see or experience or learn about a tool before you can say you could trust it or can trust an AI tool in cancer imaging or care.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the kind introduction, Melanie, and for an invitation to be part of it. So the trust, when you think about the trust, and I think we defined it similarly in the article, when you think about it from the clinician's perspective, it's all the basic for our work, right? So every patient has to trust the doctors when they come to see us. And it's built on several different aspects. First of them is the willingness to help, really, right? So you go to the doctor because they have knowledge, they have experience, and they want to help you, right? And it's a kind of like internal driver for most of the doctors. So we want to, to help the patient with a specific problem. And it's slightly different than AI, right? With AI, we don't really assume that it is compassionate. We don't really assume it will try to do all the best to help you. It will just do the work as the algorithm, mathematical equations. So it's slightly different, but still for the doctors, and that's really answering, I think, the second part of your question. So what to do to trust AI in this trialogue, right? So patient, doctor, and AI tools is that we know how it was designed, that we helped to design it from the beginning. We are involved until the end of the development of the tools, and we understand more or less how it works and why certain decisions were made by the algorithms, which is, of course, very tricky and very difficult. And I think Karim will be much better to explain all of these internal workings. But for us as doctors, that's basically what creates trust, understanding.
Karim, do you want to?
Yeah, so perhaps from a data scientist perspective, I would like to say that Trustworthy AI, in my view, is an AI tool that has a number of characteristics which makes people trust the AI tool. So what are these AI characteristics? And as an engineer, I like to have a checklist. I like to have a very concrete list of characteristics. So, I mean, we know most of them. We want the AI tool to be safe, to be robust, to generalize to different places, to be fair across populations. People talk a lot about explainability, etc. So really, it's about these specific properties, but also I would add, if we take other technologies like medicine or vaccines, I can make the argument that most people trust them. They go to doctors, they are given medicine or vaccines, and they take them. Not everybody trusts them. There are a lot of people who would never get vaccinated. But I would say, in general, you don't question how the drug was developed. You know that there are guidelines on how to do this, and we follow those guidelines. And perhaps this is what we are missing in AI at the moment, and that's why people are, they don't know how these AI tools have been developed. It's a very new field. Vaccines have been around for centuries almost. So I would say we will get there. We'll go to a moment where we will have these guidelines of the main steps to follow to develop an AI tools, to design it, to develop it, to validate it, and so on, in a way that people will start trusting it. At least that's my hope from a data scientist point of view.
If I may add, just on top of what you, Karim, just said, in medicine for like 30 years, we have these Oxford levels of evidence. So we've got evidence-based medicine. And really and truly, if we have appropriate level of evidence that the tools work, why wouldn't you trust it, right? That's how all the tools in medicine are built. And AI is just another tool on our shelf, right? We used to use computers for ages. Nobody really asked how they work, how these silicon processors work. Well, we trust them. We use text editors. We use different PACS systems. We use different electronic health record systems. And we don't really bother as doctors or patients if this information is stored correct, processed correct. We just trust that, it was built as it should be. And with AI, there is always more questions since the ChatGPT came into action. And since it started to hallucinate, right? So it became kind of creative. So that's the big issue in trusting AI tools nowadays, I understand. And when we talk to the patients, that's usually the bad example they bring, right? ChatGPT and hallucinations. And that's what really started to question AI and the proper workings of AI.
So, Maciej, do you say people already bring some, well, of course, experience with AI? Most of the time they mean ChatGPT, I guess.
Yes.
And then question the tool as such. Is this your observation?
It is, and it's a kind of like transposition from this specific tool to another tools. And nobody really wonders how it works internally, because large language models are slightly different than what we use for the image analysis, right? Currently, you've got those more advanced tools where you can, of course, analyze text, analyze images, combine multiple different types of data. And it's much more sophisticated and much more precise, really, than it used to be like 20 or 30 years ago. So all those tools are much better. And I think that's the way forward, really.
If I can add something here. So I think AI tools make mistakes, so they can hallucinate, but doctors can also make mistakes, and they do. Or sometimes that's all they can do. So sometimes they miss a very important disease, like they don't see a tumor, a breast tumor, no? And that person is sent back home as if she was healthy, but then 6 months later we discovered that she was with a tumor for 6 months, and those 6 months would have been very important. So I think both make mistake, but of course it's a machine, so it's kind of it's not something we're used to. I think the day we can show those machines are doing better than the doctors, which they are already in some areas. I mean, if you look at ChatGPT, it's extraordinary what it can do for medicine, because you can give it so much information that a doctor cannot
Comprehend.
Exactly. It's just a lot of guidelines, a lot of information about drugs, a lot of information about that patient. And because it's a machine, it can go through all of them and come up with sometimes decisions that perhaps are superior to those of a doctor. So I think we'll get there. But of course, as you said, I think it's first of all, it's the evidence. We need to show that they work.
Correct.
We need to show, I would say, we need to show that they work better than when we have at the moment. People will use them the day they are better. I guess if AI can diagnose cancer better, why would people say, no, I don't want this? Of course, if it can save lives. But the evidence is still lacking, or it's partial. It works in one place, it doesn't work in another. It works with certain patients, but not with a certain minority group, or and so on. So it's early stage, and we need more evidence, basically.
For certain. And we need some kind of regulation for this, right? So on the market, there are multiple different scoring systems, for publications quality, research quality. And there's this publication Future AI from Karim, your group, right? So that we are participating as well, which is kind of like self-regulation tool. So it's not really imposed it on AI developers. It's coming from the researchers that see those downsides, or let's say unregulated things that will increase the trust. And I think that's very important initiative as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, regulation is an issue. It doesn't help, certainly, because at the moment, what we have in Europe is the MDR, or the AI Act, and it doesn't cover everything, covers certain things. The AI Act is an improvement. And of course, there's competition between world regions, between Europe and North America and Asia. And because of that, over-regulating can be complicated. So there is this tension, no? We need to regulate, but we can't regulate too much. And as a result, of course, there are things that are still not addressed properly. Yeah. So at the moment, for example, you can have an AI tool the way the MDI works is if you do some external testing and you show that it works in those external tests you did, then that's it. You get a certification for your tool and you can commercialize it. But of course, it doesn't mean it works everywhere. It only means that it works where you tested it in those places. So this is one issue, for example. Perhaps we need an extra regulation on how things need to be tested locally, things like that. And then it could work today, but perhaps in 1 year it won't work as much. So you do need the system to continuously evaluate, but also fine-tune the model. But the regulation doesn't allow fine-tuning of model, the modification of the model, no? So yeah, it's an issue, and perhaps it's something we will address in the next few years. But yeah, it's quite challenging.
And I think another issue here is the consistency of how it works, right? We had a recent discussion with Frederick Strand from Karolinska Institute during one of the project meetings in Barcelona. And what we discussed was, the question your team, Karim, was really asking. So how precise the system should be, right, for specific things? Do you want it more sensitive or do you want it more precise, right? So in here, it's a big issue. As we as doctors, we would love to have, all the metrics at the top, right? 100. But we know that algorithms don't work that way. Sometimes something can be detect everything, right? But not be really discriminating if it's benign or malignant lesion, right? So that's the issue. But the difference in between those systems supported by AI and doctors is that the systems usually perform consistently at the same level. And that's the downside of humans, right? We get tired, we get distracted. We have a lot of personal issues that can distract you from assessing the specific patient or study in radiology. And even the best performing doctors, with sensitivity at levels of 95%, 96%, it means they still make 5% errors, right? And if they get tired or it's an on call 24 hours and you're in the last hour in the morning, 5 to 6 in the morning, you of course make more mistakes than when you are, fresh starting the shift. So in here, that's the huge benefit of AI, in my opinion. Consistency of the performance.
Definitely.
I think we've got a few questions. I don't know, Melanie, do we want to assess them at the
I
end
can
or as we go?
collect it a little bit and then let's address them at the Q&A. I can have a look at them right now, but maybe to move on. So where you already mentioned a few things, but where do you see the biggest gaps at the moment between the design or the intention, how it is designed around Trustworthy AI and its real-world perception among users? So of course, these tools are designed to be trustworthy and bring all the information that convinces you, for instance, Maciej, to use it. But well, what else? Where do you see a gap besides like regulation or some guidelines that are flexible enough to adapt as with the development of the tool?
So in here, I think the regulation doesn't really follow the extent and the piece of development of AI, right? So you have this AI Act that was brewing for like several years until it was fully consulted and, finalized and published. And it's already quite a while behind the speed of development of AI. And as Karim mentioned, the open systems are not really allowed, right? You have to close the system. You can't really retrain it as you get more data, or if you do, you have to recertify it. And that's a big issue for us because we always observe a shift in different conditions. Do you remember 2018? There was no COVID. Nobody really thought about COVID, right? In like less than 2 years, the reality changed, and that was the major disease we were treating. For me, as a surgical oncologist, when I started my specialty, we had to do something crazy like 20 gastrectomies for benign reasons. Nowadays, the trainees don't get that many to do during the 6 years of general surgical training because we have PPIs, which is medication for stomach ulcers. In the past, people were just having, this massive surgery for ruptured stomach ulcers. Nowadays, we don't really see them that many, right? So the picture changes, right? The disease changes. And I think that's really the first question we have in the webinar chat, right? So the uniqueness of patients. Well, today I had the outpatient clinic for breast cancer, and one of my patients was asking me a question like, I read all about the breast cancer, and I'm like, which one, right? So this is the first question. So for a patient, for somebody who is not a medical practitioner, we often have some misconceptions. Medical knowledge is progressing very fast. I was preparing for a conference last week, and apparently I looked up a very interesting article about how fast we develop medical knowledge. And just imagine in 50s, the medical knowledge doubled in 70 years. Like when I was doing med school in 2000, I started it. Well, the knowledge then doubled in 7.5 years. When I finished, it doubled in 3.5 years. Today, the speed of development of medical knowledge and science related to medicine and your health doubles every 73 days. So just imagine any human who will be able to read up all this information, right? It's basically impossible for us humans. The knowledge increases so fast, and it's very good. It's not a bad thing. It's good. It means we know much more about the physiology, pathophysiology, how everything works, what drugs to give. The trouble is how to get this knowledge fast enough and how to consolidate it and use it for your patients. And that's really the place for new tools, something that will help you to integrate it, something that will be working somewhere in the background, helping you gathering all these new insights and incorporating them in the treatment of the patient. So every patient is different, and we know it because we have all those studies, right? And AI can help you to personalize medicine. It's one of the tools that we can use there. We already use personalized medicine in means of like genetic testing, adjusting treatment based on the different subtypes of cancers the patient has or different subtypes of disease. But the knowledge is growing. We need some consolidator, somebody who will be able to ingest it and help you make decisions.
So in medicine, I was always like, also, well, it's already some time ago, like the idea like of the standard body, like where medical trials or people were used for medical trials, which was also like a 35-year-old man most of the time. And this was, and then we also like, of course, the population is more well than that, and we can learn by the differences, right? Also, I think this is
Correct.
also the comment on that. I also want to maybe take another one from the chat because it goes in that direction, but a little bit more challenging because you already pointed out we want to be convinced that an AI tool works correctly. So how it is built, how it is trained, how uncertain are decisions, and so on. I think, yeah, I agree. This is also quite agreeable. But do we have the similar, or unfortunately, we do not have the similar information about the doctors who taught them, what experience they have, whether they have encountered similar medical cases, what are their like abilities, and so on.
Okay, in here, it's a very simple answer, really. So it happens in the United States. It doesn't happen in Europe. So whenever you go to the doctors in the United States, you go to their office in Poland and European countries. Usually, what we have in the office is like blank canvas around you, or there is some nice picture, a photo, or something. In States, when you go to a practitioner, they have all those certificates on the wall, and usually it's the most important one, just a single one, tiny, just behind your doctor. And it states Oxford, Harvard, Yale University. And basically, that's where you get the information about your doctor and the training. And you assume that if the doctor managed to get to these very fancy schools, well, they probably got a very good training. And usually you tend to avoid, if you can afford, because that's an important aspect of United States. If you can afford, you go to those ones that have very good qualifications, so had a very good training. In Europe, it's much more difficult. It happens a bit. I've got some relatives in Belgium, and apparently it works similar in Belgium. Usually, the private doctors have their certification on the walls. Usually they have the website where they show all the certificates from very important courses. They show that they progress in medical knowledge and that every year they update the knowledge, because that's important. It doesn't really matter if I finished Harvard 50 years ago or not. It matters if you stay up to date with all the current medical knowledge, because of the speed the knowledge is developing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, but for AI, the problem is slightly different. It's not like they want to know what are the qualifications of the AI tool, because we could also give like a piece of paper explaining things about the AI tool, where it was built and how, and if a few things. But it seems that people want something extra, which is the question that was asked by Irene, which is how it works. Almost, the which we call the explainability, no? And it's almost the equivalent for current medicine would be that people ask how the drugs work. What is the mechanism that for each drug to actually work on the patient? And that we'd never ask for it. We don't care. We just trust people who who develop those drugs, that they were properly validated, and that's it. We still can read a little bit about it when we buy that drug. There is the leaflet. It tells you a few things, but most people don't read them. But for some reason, for AI, people want more. We want to understand exactly how, especially doctors, I would say. Doctors want to understand how that worked. Fair enough. They feel more comfortable to know how that AI tool got to that decision. Yeah, I would say explainability is still a mystery a little bit. There's been so much research on it, and I have the impression it's still not properly addressed. Still doesn't work really well. The explanations sometimes are weird, or it's not exactly what people want. So I don't know whether things will change culturally. Maybe one day we'll get to the point, similarly to drugs, where people will stop asking for explainability. They will say, okay, it's validated and it works really well, and I don't need to know how this very complex neural network got its decision. Or perhaps people will develop techniques to provide explanations that make sense. There are already some techniques. So, for example, in imaging, there are these techniques that provide heat maps. They tell you this is the area of the image that was used by the neural network to reach that decision. Doesn't tell you exactly how it reached that decision, but at least it tells you which part of the data of the images were used. But research has shown that sometimes these techniques don't work very well, or it gives you it points to part of the images, and it sort of doesn't make sense, no? So I don't know. I still think this is still a work in progress. Explainability, it's not, seems to be important, but yeah, it's quite challenging.
But don't you agree that, if those systems were like very accurate, you wouldn't bother how they did it, right? So it really relates to this 10, 20% margin of, accuracy
yeah.
at the level of 80 something. So that's why we really want to dig in, and
But
we
it's the
wonder
same with
why to make
drugs.
mistakes.
Drugs don't work 100%, but people
Sure.
don't ask, don't say, yeah, you must tell me how
Okay.
this chemical, this molecule works.
The thing is, the development of drugs is very well regulated for several years, and FDA and EMA regulated it very well. You've got all those 4 phases of clinical trials
Exactly.
and stuff, right? So we know that if something makes to the market, it probably had to go through this specific pathway with 4 stages of development. The other thing in medical schools, and probably that's why we ask those questions, we have pharmacology for over a year. And in there, you learn how the different drug groups work, why they
Yeah.
work, how they cooperate with your physiology, with your immune system. So we more or less understand. And then when there is a new drug developed, if they tell me, well, that's alkaloids, well, I will know that alkaloids used to work that way. So, well, I accept it. In here, it's something new, right? Drugs are 200 years, very well researched. And really, the drugs are coming from like Mesopotamia and so on, 5,000 years experience. With AI, it's what, 70 years, right?
But do you really understand the way drugs work?
For some, we do, not for all.
Yeah, because that's my sometimes it's almost like a trial and error. They try these drugs,
It
and
is.
sometimes they don't work for their purpose, and then they found out they work for something else. And then
Sure.
they said, okay, it works. We've done our clinical trial. It works. Let's use them. But I'm not convinced everybody understand exactly at the biomolecular level how these things work at the cellular level and so on. And yet we like
Absolutely.
them, these drugs. We use them, and I don't know.
We don't understand ChatGPT completely, but we still use it,
We
right?
still use it.
Yeah,
Today.
exactly.
So, yeah.
This discussion also caused more questions, so I also want to take them. So one is drugs. Oh, no more question. Drugs are tested regarding safety in a very transparent procedure. So clinical trials. Does this exist for AI?
Yeah, I can see that.
Like
Yeah, we're still not there. We will get there. I would say we don't have the same level of transparency, but I think now regulation require this, like the AI Act. They require, for example, data provenance. You need to say where the data came from, you know, where are its characteristics and so on. And so I think we're getting there. We are improving, that's for sure. I think a few years ago, Google published, it was one of those first landmark papers. Google published a paper that showed how the AI was doing better than a doctor at detecting breast cancer. That was quite spectacular. They were able to detect tumors that 6 expert radiologists were missing.
Mhm.
But if it was 5 years ago, it was published in January 2020, if I remember well. But they gave almost no information about how they built the AI tool. It was just, but it was quite impressive. And but 5 years later, I think we've improved. There are a lot of reporting guidelines on how to how to describe your AI tool. But I think sometimes, especially commercial companies, they don't give all the details, of course. I mean, there are a lot of things about ChatGPT that we don't know. Part of it was published years ago, and we sort of know how it works, but not everything. So there is that as well. Huh? I don't know how it is in the drug in drug industry. Do they really give all the information about the way the molecules work and so on? I don't know. Perhaps they do. I don't. I'm not familiar. Yeah. So I think we're improving. We're getting more and more transparent. Yeah,
I like the last comment from Irene, which really refers to what you just said, Karim.
yeah,
So she says that there is some misunderstanding, right? About all of this, how we need to understand drugs and how we need really to understand the AI. And I completely agree. And it's really what I said. If I was sure that it's like mistakes free in 96% of my patients, well, I wouldn't really wonder how it did it. It would be just better than me in several instances, right? The big issue here will be like there was a big presentation about a leading company for AI interpretation of mammograms 2 or 3 years ago when they made to the European market with EU certified tool. So they had this webinar and we had a very interesting discussion because they presented the AUC, so accuracy of like 96%. And my biggest question was, so what is this 4%? Is it a specific subgroup of patients that it doesn't really perform that well? Or are they mixed populations? Or does it make random mistakes everywhere? Because for me as a doctor, that's really the most important information, right? Like with what you, Karim, said with Viagra. Well, we used it for the treatment of hypertension. It turned out it's very good for something different than hypertension. For hypertension, it was just mediocre. Certainly much less good than other drugs for hypertension, but it's now a big player in the market for something different. So the same in here. Maybe those tools will perform very well in our patients, in specific populations, and we will due to the transparency, we'll know that, for example, well, it doesn't really perform good in Eastern countries or in Japan, China, I don't know, Western countries. And basically don't use it there. Or you will know that, well, it performs very good for most of the patients, but not the very skinny patients or very obese patients. And then knowing the limitations, I will be on a safe side as a doctor, right? So it's in here, it's more about informed usage of those tools.
But it's not what some doctors complain about. If it was this, it would be easy to solve. All we need to do is be transparent and provide all the information, as you said. That is clear we need to do. Say what are the limitations of our AI tool and risks in detail we will have to do. But some are asking more than that. They're saying, tell me how the AI tool got to that decision.
Exactly.
Yeah. They want to know which variables were combined and how they were combined, and if it's imaging, which tissues and which structures in the image. Is it the tumor? Is it the shape of the tumor? Is it regular? Is it irregular? The size, the texture, how it is. They want to understand all that. For some reason, they are more willing to trust an AI tool that gives them that extra information of explainability. And that part is a little bit challenging at this stage. It's still challenging.
But it's direct translation from our training, right? That's
perhaps,
because most of the doctors are like walking algorithms, right? Because we learn that if you have this and this, you go there. If the answer to this is no, you go to different pathway. It's like mathematical algorithms. That's what we use every day. So if we can translate the internal workings of AI into those algorithms that we are using every day, it's basically much easier to comprehend.
Yes.
I would just want also to take another question that combines a lot of it and also brings it a little bit back to the question of trust or trustworthiness coming from a pharmacist, as we learn. So because in pharma, people can actually answer questions, but nobody can know what really happens and what was reported. So maybe in AI, there is no person to explain. Is that a challenge right now when we talk explainability as a concept? Does it needs the human, the person? Because we also have it had in our like expert workshop discussions, we trust people, not tools. So who is this a way? So is this a gap or something that is missing at the moment? The people being there, explaining, being addressed with questions.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's a gap or not, I have to admit. All I'm saying is that from my experience, you meet a lot of doctors that tell you I need the explanations. And all I'm saying is that nowadays we don't have methods that give you explanations that are always meaningful and even consistent. So there are all sorts of papers that I could show you where you take a case, an image, and then you provide an explanation using state-of-the-art explainability techniques on how the decision was taken. Then you add a bit of noise. It's the same image, and then it gives you a different explanation. It shows you different areas, same decision. And that's confusing. It's a different explanations. And what does it mean for the decision making? Does the doctor now need to take a different clinical decision because the explanation was different, even though it's the same decision? I don't know. So it's still unclear to me in my head how this is going to work in the future. And that's why I'm saying maybe one day people will say, let's forget about this explainability. All we need is transparency. We need to know the risks and the mitigations and so on. And that's good enough because the field improved exponentially, In 5 years, the model we're going to have are going to be crazy, like incredibly powerful. And are we going to be able to explain them? Perhaps not. And therefore, we will forget about explainability, or it will be a different type of explainability, the explainability that was that Irene described in the chat. Perhaps that's the type of explainability we will need in the future. Yeah.
But also in here, for me as a doctor, sometimes I probably wouldn't really need the complete explainability, but I would love to have this, heat map on the sides telling me that, for example, this decision the system is sure in 100%. In another patient, it's just 67%. And then I will know that, well, probably this 67% needs verification, right? So I will be sure that I can depend on the system and the outputs, and I will know when to act upon the decisions of the system, or the indications of the system, because that's really what I need, right? So if the system is 100% sure it's correct, in most of the cases it will be correct. If it's not certain about the outputs, then probably that's where the human has to step in, and that's really enough for me to know.
Yeah.
So uncertainty, as you mentioned, it is also well, part of medicine, right? We had this now. We do not know everything like exactly. So is this also a way forward to be more clear about uncertainty, or should this be, well, part of building trust, to also communicate openly about this and or how to handle it? Because often we have the feeling, okay, nobody wants to hear like especially from a doctor, I would say, I'm uncertain.
Correct.
So how can we manage that when we know now a tool? I think this is one of the fears, right? That there, of course, are errors, but we had the discussion before that also doctors are not 100%. So how can we, well, better manage uncertainty with that?
So when I teach medical students, I always say that medicine is like this famous book, 50 Shades of Grey, right? So it's a very good title for medicine, really. So whenever you have a patient, it's something in between a specific range, right? So you have a range of the diagnosis when you see the first patient first time, then you just narrow it until you get one final decision, and then you give them treatment. The difficulty is we have multiple different treatments for the same disease for different patients. And the reason for it is that everybody will respond slightly differently. So it's a kind of, again, game of try and win. So you try different treatment pathways, and usually you guess correct and your patient gets better. If they don't, you just change it. So it's that's how it works. With AI, we don't really accept this approach, right? We want it to be error-free and to guess correctly in the first instance. With humans, we know that it's a pathway. It's not usually 0-1 decision. I don't know, from your point of view, Karim.
Yeah, uncertainty. Yeah, that's another complicated topic. So there are ways to calculate uncertainty. So that's one way to help. If you can tell the doctor, I've just well, the AI just made this decision, but in this particular case, the uncertainty is lower because of the data quality, or so that can help a little bit. Yeah, I guess as a doctor, are you always certain? I mean, what's the level of uncertainty? I guess it's the same. Sometimes you're quite uncertain. You've got a case and it's not clear to you what's going on, right?
For sure.
Yeah, so I guess for the AI, this will be the same, but you could argue that at least we can quantify that uncertainty based on past examples. So it's really a statistical approach, it's just Bayesian approach. And you say, okay, this time this is a complicated case, and it raises it as a red flag, and then you could add new exams, for example. Let's say for this guy, we need to do another scan or ask for another biomarker or something of that sort. So yeah.
For sure. In daily practice, it's quite common, right? That you have those patients that you're uncertain, especially in the imaging. And what basically you do, you ask your friend or your mentor to help you out with the specific case. With AI, we don't have the second chances. That's the difficulty. Or if you get the second chance and ask another system, the problem is often you get a different decision. And then there's an issue of trust again. Because if it's my mentor, I trust them. But it's much easier, to depend on their decisions. With AI systems, it's slightly different. It brings more uncertainty if you have two different systems outputting different things for your patient. So it doesn't calm you, it makes you more anxious.
So where to put now, as you already mentioned it, trust is also in relationships. So in between you and your mentor, between the patient and the doctor, between clinician and clinician. So we have the case that in, two radiologists are looking at an image, or I guess if you are uncertain to talk to a colleague and or get a different opinion on things, where to put AI here? What role? What AI? Yeah, we know what role could it fulfill in all of that?
So if I can speak again first, sorry, Karim, for that.
No problem.
So with AI, we have different uses for AI, right? So in breast cancer screening, it's simple. In medicine, it's worked out in Europe. We have the double screening. So you've got two independent radiologists. Everybody is assessing the same mammography independently. We don't see each other's outputs. And then the supervisor is just checking if we are at the same page, right? So if both of us give the same BI-RADS score to both studies, that means that we agree without seeing each other. So it's simple. The problem is when we don't agree, because then we need a third reader, somebody more experienced. And that's how it's solved in at least screening. With AI tools, we could do much the same. So we could have like AI replacing both those doctors. We can replace one of them, or we can give them a supervisor in means of AI. And all of them have advantages and disadvantages. So quite current studies from Karolinska again showed that adding, replacing one radiologist with AI gives you much the same number of cancers detected with much less biopsies performed, which is a huge benefit because we get less false positive results, which is great because then the patient doesn't have to go through the whole pathway of breast cancer diagnosis. They don't have to come back, have the biopsy, wait for the results, less stress, less procedures, less complications. So that's how you can solve it. Probably the worst case scenario is when you give the AI supervisor, because it doesn't really solve anything, because again, you don't have this human at the top, so to make the final decisions. So that's a tricky part. And they showed also that if you replace both radiologists with AI systems, it's pretty effective as well as replacing one of the radiologists. And in here, we always talk like about replacing people and, getting rid of human force from the workforce and replacing everybody with AI. So this, dummy AI sci-fi scenarios. And it doesn't really work that way. The trouble is that the populations are growing constantly, right? We have more and more people in the world. And the difficulty with this is that we are having much more elderly populations in the world. We don't have that many newborns, but we have a lot of elderly patients. And that's the population that gets cancer often. So this population is growing, and the number of doctors is more or less stable in most of the countries. So every day we have to deal with more and more radiological exams. They are becoming more popular. A lot of people attend screening. So in here, we don't really want to replace the doctors. We want to give them something extra to help to speed up the work. So they can replace in the assessment. But very useful tool for me as a doctor is just make a priority for the studies that need priority. So just imagine emergency department, right? We ask for like 100 CTs, ultrasounds every day. And these two radiologists on call have to choose which is the most important. If you had this AI screening all these studies and telling us, well, look, these guys have something severe, very acute, see these studies first, that will really help a lot at this stage. So that's very useful place. The same with the mammographies. If we had a system that told us, well, look, these studies contain nothing abnormal, don't look at them, right? Just gives us 30% of studies to review. That's a huge saving of time and efforts. I don't know if it answered your question, sorry.
Yeah, if Karim doesn't want to respond, I also want to pick up another question from the very lively audience. That's great. Today we have this before that, AI is trained on data that needs to represent certain population, work in certain populations. So this question is also focusing on another aspect in, differences. So how to tackle cultural differences about trust in medical AI. So how to So as we can say, there is no standard here. There is maybe also no standard assumption when it comes to trust, because depending, as is mentioned, different levels of trust in science, trust in healthcare systems, trust in how medical data is handled, and also with a reference to a recent scandal in Spain about breast cancer triage. I'm not aware of that, but the question is, how to deal with when we want to make something trustworthy or rely on trust, how to handle differences among countries or cultures.
Okay, I'm going first this time.
Yes.
So, I think this is quite an important question, perhaps one that sometimes is not given the right attention. And I don't know exactly in Europe the answer, but I was lucky enough that I worked on Project AI in Europe and also in Africa, and I've seen really, and now I understand what we mean when we talk about these cultural differences. So, for example, I have a project on AI for obstetric ultrasound in Kenya, and we spoke to the local populations, to pregnant women, their husbands, community leaders. We spoke to decision makers in those villages, and you see that actually these cultural differences make a big importance on AI, even the way you would design it, what you would include in it. So, for example, in that project in Kenya, so first, some women in those community, they said, "Oh, we're not interested in this AI." They said things like, "My grandmother had a lot of kids and there was never a problem. Why do we need this now?" So first of all, you're trying to build a solution with AI, and before you even started, the trust is not there. They say things like, "Oh, it's going to hurt my baby, it's going to make it crazy," or something like that. So how do you build trust in those communities? No, where culturally, the way medicine is viewed and the way technology is viewed is completely different before you even go into AI, no? So it's really complicated. So in that particular example, we ended up talking to the religious leaders in those communities, and they were very helpful, actually. So they said, "Yeah, we have a need in our communities. We need AI, but perhaps what you could do with your tool is not include sex in one of those endpoints, because if you include sex, then people will do abortion, and we are religious. We are against abortion, and therefore you need to remove sex as one of the endpoints of your AI tool for pregnancy screening." And at some point we said, "Okay, we cracked it. We know how to solve it now. All we need to do is to remove sex." Of course, it's a shame because in Europe, when a woman goes to see an obstetrician, she gets that information if she wants to. She can choose to ask what is the sex of the baby. And but it's not that simple, because then there were some women saying, "Well, we want also sex. Why is it that in other places they can get that information, not us? And this is discrimination, isn't it?" So it's really difficult to deal with those situations. Perhaps I chose an extreme example because this is Africa, it's not Europe. But we could imagine in Europe it would be the same, because in Europe, first of all, we have a very diverse population. We have a population from all over the world living in Europe. So perhaps the way they see medicine and AI would be different. And this could create difficulties. You could end up with places where a certain population group does not trust these AI tools for whatever reason. It could be cultural, religious, or whatever.
The question, there's a lot of hope regarding the future ability of AI to help us understand how genomic variations interact with the environment, leading to health outcomes. Do you see this expected granularity is being realized in domains such as radiology, for example, interactions between imaging and air quality data, what do you think these hypes and potential busts mean in terms of future of trust in the long term?
I think it's a very tricky question.
Yeah.
Certainly, that will be perfect, and it will be a reality one day. We need basically multimodal systems to solve such complex questions, and we need a lot of data to do it. Certainly, the newest systems are able to run conclusions based on scarce data, but for the moment, my observation is that it's very difficult with those AI systems that are available to combine these types of information like air pollution, genetic modifications, and so on. Because the difficulty here is that we doctors, we scientists, don't fully understand a lot of those mechanisms.
Mm. And the last one is about, well, with the AI Act and EHDS and its implementation, what kind of novel problems do you see from your expertise? What new kind of ethical, legal, or societal issues may emerge? Or let's say, what kind of challenges are you seeing coming?
Well, that's a big question. We'd need an hour to discuss this, but I would
At least.
say, yeah,
At least.
some we already discussed. So, for example, the fact that AI is dynamic and requires processes to deal with changes in the data, and the fact that these tools can continue to learn. For the EHTS, it's really exciting at the same time, kind of mysterious. So the EHTS means in 2029, supposedly, all the data will be interoperable in Europe, and clinical centers have to comply with that, and will be easier to access data even for AI purposes, no? In theory, I don't know how it's going to work. That's why I'm saying it's still a bit mysterious. But I'm still not clear whether the hospitals will sign off on the reuse of the data on behalf of the patients, and perhaps there will be some ethical issues there. So it's kind of exciting, the HTS, but I think even the authorities still don't fully understand how it's going to work. So perhaps we could discuss this question in a couple of years. We can come back and have another webinar. But it's exciting moments ahead of us.
The very interesting part of this question is what problems do you see? From my knowledge, when I discussed the HDS in some of the meetings related to the HDS implementation in different countries, the difficulty in here is, as always in Europe, we don't speak the same language. That's the first issue, and the second is we don't speak the same language. So that's on mental level. So European Union is very democratic, and it leaves a lot up to the states countries. So every country will regulate it on their own level slightly differently, and that will be a mess. That's my private opinion by looking at how the regulation goes. We have like 4 years for the implementation, and every country is trying to solve it differently. And it will have the huge impact on data that is provided from separate countries. And at the moment, there's a big discussion about, privacy of the data, what can be in those systems. And we had this funny discussion earlier in the year. In January, we had a conference on EHDS implementation in Warsaw. They had the pleasure to represent one of the EUCAM project. And we had this funny discussion with EU officials. And they were very, very, very convincing. And they were like, the doctors are there to create good quality data. And I'm like, no, I'm there to treat patients. I'm not there to create and curate the data. That's not part of my job, right? That's just the byproduct of my work. The medical data in the medical repositories or electronic health records is just the byproduct of the contact with the patient. Of course, it should be a good quality, but for a completely different reason. It's usually a legal reason. I have to document everything properly to show the track of my thinking, so somebody could retrack it if there is a mistake or if there is a problem with the patient that I didn't solve. And it's not to be trained to train AI algorithms. And a lot of people have this misconception, right? So the idea in this meeting was to force the doctors to create a specific amounts of data for specific diseases. And overregulation of everything is always a difficult issue, and usually it doesn't end up very good in European Union. because there are so many different approaches to this. So that's a big issue that has to be solved before EHDS is in action.
I have to say goodbye, guys, because
Yeah,
they're
we
waiting
are
for me.
unfortunately. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Out
so
of
much.
time.
It's a pleasure.
I would also remind the audience that we regularly share updates and on all these topics, and you can find it, for instance, in our newsletter, and where you can find on our website bbmri-eric.eu on the ELSI knowledge base and website. And if you enjoyed this recording, I'm sure it's very helpful for many people. Do share it with interested friends. We will share the recording of the webinar and also as a podcast also later, and also don't miss our next episode. And thanks for attending.